basically it's the accumulation of my personal story and my 20 something years in this industry, working with people, my academic training, my clinical training, everything kind of aggregated into this one book, into 5 chapters, because then there was all this room for, the recipes, the 75 recipes. But I'm excited to share this because it's a very personal journey to me. And that's actually where I wanted to begin. And I've never shared these photos before. So this is me circa 4 or 5 years old. My mom said that I danced before I walked. I loved dancing. And I grew up in a studio like this and, practicing my pirouettes and my rond de jambes and my pas de bourrées and all of those things. I loved dance more than anything. And, as I was growing up, getting to like maybe 10, 11 years old, I started, I was watching myself in the mirror, as we all do in dance class. And I was watching kind of my body start to change, as bodies do at that age. And one day around that time, my teacher called out from the end of the classroom, and she said, "Julieanna, it's time to cut out your snacks." And this was in front of all my friends and colleagues and everything. And it was like, I didn't realize it at the time, but this was kind of this very poignant moment that changed the whole trajectory of my entire life. It made me curious about, well, what does that mean, snacks? And what does that mean, body image and weight and diet and nutrition and how it affects your body. And granted, dance is kind of, it gravitates towards this world more than most worlds, but it was really significant for me. And it set me off on this journey to learn. I wanted to know everything there was about nutrition and diet. And I just started studying and reading. And at one point I landed on this profound book by John Robbins called Diet for a New America. And it was the first time I learned about how food ended up on the plate. And I didn't want to contribute to that world anymore. As soon as I read it, it was like I was unseated. And I decided I wasn't going to eat animal products. I did not know what that meant. And there was no internet back then that I had access to. So I just decided to stop eating animals. And I was eating the side dishes my mom would make, or I would eat, granola bars and rice cakes and that kind of thing. And of course, my parents were worried about me, as good parents would be, because I wasn't eating what they thought I was supposed to be eating. And I write about this in my book, The Vegetarian Diet, because it was quite an interesting moment. I had what I refer to as an intervention. And my parents took me out to dinner with our friend Kendra, who's a nurse, and we went to a steakhouse, and they ordered me a teriyaki steak with a pineapple ring on top. And I just remember looking at that steak and thinking, once you know, you can't unknow. And I remember cutting into the steak, thinking about all that, while Kendra was telling me, you're going to be deficient in protein and iron and all this stuff. And she scared me properly into thinking I really do need to eat the steak. And it was a hard bite to swallow, but I did. And like most people, I went back to the norm of eating animals. But in my head, I kept thinking, the vegetarians aren't dropping out like flies. We're not hearing these stories of like mass vegetarian, incidents of illness. Like that just wasn't a thing. So I knew there was more to this story, and I kept reading and reading. Now, fast forward. I have never shared these photos. This is me acting. I was an actress because I grew up in LA, and a lot of people go into acting in LA. And I was really passionate about it. And I was traveling the world. You could see in the upper right corner, I was in Japan doing a play there. And I was doing a lot of Shakespeare, and I loved acting. And I was at an arts high school here in Los Angeles, kind of like Fame, but the LA version of it. So I was in the theater department doing all sorts of theater. And I eventually ended up with, an agent. My parents let me get an agent once I had a car. So I was driving around and auditioning and, for movies and TV and modeling things and music videos, stuff like that. And, it was really kind of a strange world too. But at one point, my manager said to me, "Julieanna, you got to lose a few pounds." And, for camera. And you can see I was never like really overweight, but I wasn't like camera ready according to Hollywood standards. And so here we were back again. And so I was like, okay, I'm already exercising like crazy. I loved exercising my whole life. I loved that. But I got really into it after what happened in ballet class. And I was already eating healthy. So the manager said, here, I'm going to set you up with my trainer. She's great. Okay. So I went to this trainer, and lo and behold, I found a new passion. I loved personal training. I'm like, this is perfect. I can do this while I'm, pursuing my acting career. And so while I was in college, or at the end of college, I was studying pre-med and theater. And I became a personal trainer, and it was great. I loved it. But then when I started personal training, when I finished school and actually really started working in it, people were asking me about nutrition. And I didn't want to just regurgitate the chapter on nutrition that I had read in my personal training handbook. I wanted to know why and what, and really understand nutrition, really go deep into it. And so I applied to grad school to become a registered dietitian and get my master's in nutrition. And I got in at Cal State Northridge, and it was the best time of my academic career ever. I hated school until this point because it was so interesting. I was learning about biochemistry and microbiology and physiology, medical nutrition therapy, statistics, all this amazing stuff. And these little kind of nuggets started to sneak in, like, all these recommendations to tell your patients they need 3 servings of dairy every single day. And then at the bottom, it would say sponsored by the Dairy Council. Or, I would go to the big conference, and it was like this huge presence of the dairy industry and the fast food industry and all the industry. It was really interesting. And I also happened to look and see, oh, wait a second, you can get protein and iron in plants, and actually better sourced in plants. Like, I started to see all this stuff kind of come together. So I finished graduate school, and then I had my daughter, who might make an appearance because today's the first day of spring break. So she's sleeping in, but she might pop in here any minute now. And after I had my daughter, I dove in. I went plant-based, and everything about my health changed. My acne that I struggled with my entire life, tried everything, was better. My lifelong sinus infections that just made me fall asleep in class because I had to take Benadryl all the time, like that finally improved. No more sinus infections. And I had them all the time. My GI, for everything, I felt better than ever. So as I was transitioning from student and personal trainer to mom and registered dietitian, I started implementing this with my clients. And that was it. That was unbelievable. Beyond anything I had learned in grad school about what to expect with the power of food and nutrition, I've seen all the stuff. So at this point now, I've worked with, I want to say, hundreds of people directly one-on-one, and then thousands of people that I've interacted with through my audiences, through my books, through my TV shows, through social media, thousands and thousands of stories at this point after 17 years in this world. And I aggregated all of this and concentrated all of this into 5 chapters into this book. And this is the one that published on 12/21. So I'm going to summarize it here because I can't believe how much I learned. And I feel so excited. And I've watched so many people completely transform their lives and their relationship with food, their relationship to their body, because that's what's so important. That's where it all started for me. And I'm really excited to share this with you today. So the 3 components that I've put together, none of this is new. There's nothing here that you haven't heard before, I don't think, but I've put it together in a way that has evolved out of these conversations with my clients and evolved from what I understood to be true, and then what I saw to be true, and then all the science and everything in between. So it's a combination of 3 things. One, of course, is a whole food plant-based diet. Secondly is, this data on time restricted eating is so exciting. And then here's where all of it happens. Like, you could know everything about nutrition, but the mindfulness component, the behavioral component is enormous. We are tribal people. We want to connect and break bread with people. We are psychosocial beings living in this world, and it's so much more difficult than just what you know. So all of that is what I've evolved in my conversations and I shared in this book. And I'm going to give you a little bit of that today.